London's less lovely postcodes, 10 areas you might want to avoid. London, eh? A right melting pot, this place. Vibrant, exciting, full of life. But let's be honest, not all parts of London were created equal. Some areas, well, they've got a bit of a reputation. We're talking crime rates, struggling schools, the lot. Think of it as a bit of a heads up, a guide for those new to the big smoke or those thinking of switching boroughs. From Barking to Brixton, we're diving deep into the areas that often get overlooked, and for good reason. Today we're exploring 10 areas in London that are often considered less desirable due to various challenges. First up, we find ourselves in Barking and Dagenham, a bit of an East End classic. Now, the people here are salt of the earth, real grafters, but even they'll tell you it's got its problems. Crime, unfortunately, is a big one. Jobs are scarce too. Unemployment's high, and the schools aren't exactly topping the league tables. Plus, the air quality, let's just say you can practically taste the diesel some days. Don't get me wrong, there are pockets of good here, but overall, Barking and Dagenham, it's a tough nut to crack. Next, we're off to Croydon, or more specifically, West Croydon. Now, Croydon's a funny one. Bits of it are being done up all trendy, but then you've got areas like West Croydon that feel stuck in a bit of a time warp. We're talking high crime rates, especially among the youth. Kids hanging around on street corners, getting into all sorts. The transport system is rammed, always packed like a tin of sardines. It's a shame, really, because Croydon's got potential, but until they sort out these issues, it's going to struggle to shake off its rough around the edges reputation. Our next stop is Newham, home to the Olympic Park, no less. You'd think, with all that regeneration money, it'd be a utopia, wouldn't you? Well, not quite. Newham's got a bit of a split personality. On the one hand, you've got these shiny new developments, but on the other, you've got areas like East Ham and Stratford still grappling with sky-high crime rates, overcrowding, and pollution levels that would make a smog mask blush. Housing is a nightmare too, expensive and hard to come by. It's a tale of two cities, really, and in Newham, the gap between the haves and the have-nots is pretty stark. Next, we find ourselves in Hackney, a place that's seen its fair share of change over the years. Parts of it, like Dalston and Shoreditch, have gone all hipster heaven, full of artisan coffee shops and vintage clothes rails. But then you head to places like Clapton and it's a different story altogether. Crime's still a problem, gang violence rears its ugly head, and the streets feel a bit rough around the edges. Gentrification's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Brings in the fancy coffee shops, but pushes out the locals who can't afford a 10-quid latte. Hackney's a prime example of that. Now we're in Tower Hamlets, a stone's throw from the gleaming towers of Canary Wharf where the money men rake it in. You'd think some of that wealth would trickle down, wouldn't you? But sadly, no. Tower Hamlets has got one of the highest poverty rates in London. It's a borough of stark contrast where you can walk down one street and see £1 million apartments and then turn a corner and find yourself in the midst of deprivation. Crime's a constant worry, especially in areas like Whitechapel and Mile End, and the housing situation, forget about it. It's a tough place to live, constantly overshadowed by the wealth it can't seem to grasp. Next stop, Tottenham, part of the London borough of Haringey. Now, Tottenham's had a rough time of it. Riots, social unrest, high crime rates. It's been through the ringer. They're trying, they really are, to regenerate the area, but it's an uphill battle. Unemployment's still high, investment's low, and the streets still have that slightly edgy feel to them. The public services are stretched thin too. Schools and hospitals struggling to cope with the demand. Onwards we go to Harlesden, part of the borough of Brent. Now, Harlesden's got a bit of a reputation, and sadly it's not a good one. Drugs, gangs, violence, they're all rife here. It's a place where people seem trapped in a cycle of deprivation, unable to break free from the grip of poverty and crime. The streets are often littered with rubbish, the air thick with the smell of weed, and the atmosphere is tense. It's a side of London that tourists rarely see, but it's a side that needs to be acknowledged, needs to be addressed. Our next stop is Peckham in the borough of Southwark. Now, Peckham's another one of those areas that's seen a lot of change, a lot of gentrification. You've got your trendy rooftop bars popping up, your organic sourdough bakeries, but Scratch beneath the surface and you'll find the same old problems bubbling away. Crime's still a major concern, especially violent crime and antisocial behavior. The streets are crowded, the housing situation's a nightmare, and tensions are high. Peckham's a microcosm of London's struggles, a place where the fight for space, for resources, for a decent quality of life is constantly being waged. Next, we're off to Lambeth, more specifically Stockwell and Brixton. Now, Brixton's got a special place in London's heart. It's a cultural hub full of life, music and history. But Brixton's also been plagued by crime for years, especially drug-related crime and gang violence. Gentrification's hit Brixton hard too, pushing up rents and forcing out long-term residents. It's a shame because Brixton's got so much to offer, but it's being slowly eroded by the same problems that plague so many parts of London. Our final stop takes us to Waltham Forest, specifically Leytonstone and Walthamstow. These areas have been trying to shake off their slightly rough-around-the-edges reputation for years, but it's proving difficult. Crime's still a problem, especially theft and antisocial behaviour, and there's a real lack of investment in the area. The streets are crying out for a bit of TLC, the buildings are looking tired, and there's a general feeling of neglect. It's a shame because there are pockets of good here, some lovely parks and green spaces, but they're often overshadowed by the more negative aspects of the area. Leytonstone and Walthamstow deserve better. They deserve a chance to thrive. So, there you have it, a glimpse into some of London's more challenging areas. It's not pretty, is it? But it's important to remember that these areas are just a small part of this vast, sprawling city. There's good and bad in every corner of London. And these areas are full of resilient, resourceful people who are just trying to make the best of things. Change is happening, slowly but surely, and there's always hope for the future. Despite these challenges, it's important to remember that many of these areas also have pockets of growth and regeneration. The situation can vary significantly from street to street, and improvements are always on the horizon.